Sheila, look, there have been a lot of big red flags, Celsius, three arrows. You heard what Marty Chavez said there about regulation. Are we behind? Are we waiting for a calamity?
Know that we're waiting for a calamity. I find that a bit dramatic. I mean, I think we've seen a number of cycles and waves in this industry. And I've been in this space for 7 years now. And this is not the first time we've seen a big crash followed by a pretty quick rally. And I think Hannah mentioned earlier that we are starting to see a little bit of that rally start to happen and more consumer confidence in these alternative assets. So I don't know that anyone's waiting for a calamity. I think there's been enough attention placed on this industry, I would say unduly placed in some cases in this industry, and skepticism around it, that I think there's been a lot of attention already paid.
What do you think is driving this rally, and how long does it last? I mean, it just seems to be bad news everywhere else when it comes to the economy.
Well, I think that's right. I think we're part of there's a broader market meltdown happening. And I actually think it's pretty profound that you're seeing these individual coins that are starting to kind of turn around and pick up a little bit. So, Ethereum, I think Hannah nailed it. I think it really is about the merge. It's the idea that this has been waiting a long time coming. People have been talking about the merge since Ethereum was first launched, and the idea that there could be this transition from what's called proof of stake to proof of work rather to proof of stake. I should note that is a 99.95% reduction in the use of energy. It's not just a 10% or 2% reduction. It's a massive reduction in energy. And energy has been a big talking point for some folks in this space. So I do think people are excited to see not even so much about the energy usage, but the fact that this major technology change can be achieved. It's complicated. It's really hard to do. The details and building these systems are so complex. But here we are for the first time really seeing this massive change in the way that infrastructure is going to run. And I think it's kind of proof that, you give it time, these things are going to thrive.
I have to ask you then about these comments that we got last week from the founder of Tezos, who basically called Ethereum a giant Ponzi scheme. I mean, you've got major skeptics, not just outside the industry, but inside the industry, who don't believe in it.
So I think one thing that's important to note about crypto is it tends to be pretty tribal. So you do have folks that have kind of picked their token, they've picked their team, and they're going to talk about their team as being the best team. And look, I mean, we're at a stage of innovation, like with any industry. There are a bunch of options. They have some similarities. They have some differences, in some cases, pretty significant differences. And, I'm agnostic about this. I don't know. The market's going to decide which of these things winds up being really sticky and taking off and which doesn't. I think it's natural to have contraction, natural to have some of these things are going to fail, right? Some are going to grow. So it's normal to me to see somebody who might be favoring a different opportunity, talking about other opportunities with a negative frame. And I think you'll see that this happens quite a bit in the industry as people talk about projects that aren't theirs.
Tribalism indeed. Where are you on the big debate about whether crypto is a security or a commodity? Because obviously that has major implications for how all of this is regulated and invested in.
Yeah, this is, I think, the debate of the age right now. And you're seeing a lot of activity on the Hill, also with Mika and the European Parliament in Europe about this topic as well, kind of defining like what is the classification of this asset, which will determine not only who regulates it, but some of the rules of engagement. What are you allowed to do? How onerous are disclosures? When do they happen? All that kind of thing, and will shape the way this really continues to develop. So my view is that most things do start off, I think, to some degree, in a somewhat centralized fashion, simply because you do have a group of people who are engaging in that build. But I do think we've seen several that over time have really evolved to be pretty decentralized. Now, the Howey test, which is what determines whether or not something is a security, does have a prong that talks about the engagement of others, right? How much does the activity of one or a group of people really affect their efforts? How does that affect the nature of the build of the project, of the price, of all those kinds of things? And in decentralized systems, there's an argument to be made that's really strong that there is not such engagement from any individual or even group that's going to affect the way that the thing tends to land, tends to grow, tends to be shaped. And so I do think we've had pretty strong idea of Bitcoin and ETH are commodities, other things being developed and happening right now. But we're going to get to a place, I think, where more and more decentralization is the norm.